Good evening, everybody. It's such a pleasure to see so many mazel faces. I feel like I haven't got a chance to see many of you in a really long time. It's really a pleasure to gather together tonight for this very special class, which I'm really excited to be able to bring to our school community. I know that the student workbook, which was included in the link in the email, was by Amazon. Nowadays, things on Amazon no longer take 2 days to come, and some of you may have been able to get it in time, and some of you might not have been able to. So I managed to get a hold of a PDF copy of just the first chapter, which I attached in the chat, which you should be able to download and even have it open in front of you on your screen, or maybe if you happen to be lucky to have a printer right next to you, you can print it out so you can have it in front of you, okay? If you have any trouble with that PDF, you can let me know. So a little bit of background about the class. This is a course for 6 weeks. It's a 6-week course. And the way that JLI courses work is that you should see it. Sorry if anyone is missing it. You should see it right at the very top of the chat. Okay. If it's here, we'll try again. We'll download it again. Just give us 1 second. So it's a 6-week course, and the way that JLI courses work is that they're very much about learning a text. Okay, there, that should do it. It's very much about looking at texts, at sources in Jewish texts and in general in text. It's a text-based class, and gleaning wisdom and insights and perspective and understanding from the text themselves, which is why the student workbook is a really important part of the class. So parenting, the art of parenting. And it truly is an art. It's not something that can be a science where there's a set prescription that you can follow. There is an art, and in some ways it can feel as messy as being an artist, but also as creative as being an artist. And there's something truly beautiful about parenting. Today's lesson is going to focus on the idea of a parenting principle and going to introduce some fundamental ideas about parenting. Now, what's unique specifically about this course and what probably motivated you to sign up for it is that unlike what makes it different than typical parenting course, you can sign up for a parenting course with a Harvard professor or a child psychologist. What is really unique? Why sign up for a parenting course from a Jewish Learning Institute? And I think that what's unique about a Jewish Learning Institute is that it gleans its inspiration from the Torah. Now we're going to talk a minute about why looking to the Torah for guidance in parenting is very valuable. But first, let's take a minute to look at the cartoon that you have in front of us. All right. How many of us can relate to this idea? Especially now when we're in a state of quarantine and we're with the kids 24/7 nonstop, and I'm afraid you have what's known as children. So before we have parents, before we are parents, before we have children, everyone has an opinion about, well, I know how we should parent children, and if only that woman or that guy was parenting their child this way or that way, things would be completely different. But as soon as we become parents ourselves and we have to deal with our own children, suddenly we realize we don't know what we're doing. And this is why, we turn for advice and for guidance, like how can I really be the best parent that I possibly can be? And this is where Torah wisdom comes into play, because Judaism has 3 unique qualities that set it apart from other parenting approaches. The first one is that Judaism has a successful parenting track record. Okay? The reason why Judaism exists till today, why we have Jewish families that have really strong Jewish identity, that keep Jewish traditions, are because of a consistent chain of parenting that took place over thousands of years through insanely traumatic events in Jewish history. And still, due to a certain type of parenting approach, Jewish parents were able to maintain Jewish traditions. So there is a track record of history. Now, not only do we see that this track record is proven in terms of the fact that there is Judaism that still exists today, that we were able to pass down, how many other societies or cultures can speak to this, that they've been in existence, since ancient times and still have children till today that still carry the same ideas and beliefs as their ancestors that existed, in the times of Avram. It's because of Jewish parents. And we're going to see soon when we're going to look at what made Avram unique as the first Jewish father. There is a certain approach to Jewish parenting. The second idea that we see is historically, Jews, it's another way that we can see a proven track record of Jewish parenting, is that there are an overabundant percentage of Jewish Nobel Prize winners. And yes, we can attribute it to many other factors like good genes or access to education. But at the same time, parenting also is related to it, because there is a certain culture in Jewish homes and Jewish families that facilitated in a very strong way this type of success and determination and valuing of academic education and ingenuity. So there is a track record that Judaism has to offer to us. The other idea that Judaism has to offer to us that is unique and is an advantage is that it is time-tested. So if I would go to Barnes & Noble and look in the parenting book section, I would find a plethora of advice out there. And what would happen if I were to take 2 books off of the shelf is that each book would tell me something completely different about this is the best way of how to raise children. In fact, if anyone remember Dr. Spock or heard of Dr. Spock, you can raise your hand. And he was really big in America. I'm not sure if in the Soviet Union he was considered respectable. But I remember my mom had a book by Dr. Spock. I know that in my grandmother's time it was the same. I even actually, when my grandmother passed away and we went to her apartment to find little things, I found a book this thick that she used when she was a mom. It was called Mothercraft. And I was reading through it, fascinated, piece of history, and I was shocked. The cover says, this is advice by 25 child developmental experts. And if we were to read this book today, we would be mortified. This is the opposite. And if we looked at Dr. Spock himself, who was considered the kind of guru of parenting and how to raise children in his time, from the first book that he published to the last book that he published, a complete change. We're talking about within one generation. So for example, one example is in his first book, he was recommending that when a child cries, we should not pick them up. We should not hold them, because this is a baby in the crib is going to spoil them. And then at the end, in his last edition that he wrote, he had completely opposite recommendation. He said, based on the new research, new studies that are coming out, now we see that this is a really important, during the stage of child's development, really important part for bonding and for attachment and nurturing. And you must pick the child up and hold them close to you. We're talking about within one generation, complete change. So as a parent, this is really scary. I don't want to be experimenting with my kid. How in the world am I supposed to figure out what the right thing to do is? So this is where Torah has an unbelievable advantage. And that Torah is time-tested. The Torah has not changed one word over all of the years since it was first given throughout all of Jewish history. The principles are the same. And that means that in any country that Jewish people have lived in any decade, Jewish families have raised children based on these principles. So it is timeless. And there's great wisdom in that. And there's also great comfort in it. I remember when I was a young mother, really being completely overwhelmed by all the parenting books that I was reading, until I started to read more about what Torah's advice is and when it comes to parenting. And that's when I started to gain my footing, learn more how to tune into my own tuition. And that gave me guidance that helped me in raising my children. And I'm still learning. And that's another reason why many times Jewish families will turn to a rabbi or rebbitzin, because it happens to be that very often they have lots of kids. I have, thank God, Baruch Hashem, 8 children, ranging in age from 3 years old, we just celebrated 3rd birthday a few months ago, all the way to age 18. So I do have a lot of experience. I also personally was an only child, so I've been learning a lot. I think my children, when they're going to be parents, God willing, they're going to have a lot more experience than I started out with. So I really relate to that feeling of, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. So it's exciting for me to share one of the things that really helped me become a more confident parent, and that was turning to Torah for these 2 reasons. That it is a time-tested, offers a time-tested formula that doesn't change. It's not like it's waiting for, here's the recommendation, but in 10 years from now, there'll be a new study, and by the way, now the Torah is going to change its advice. This is the way that it is. And there is this proven track record. So let's take a minute and begin first with a very important fundamental question. If you happen to have the text in front of you, if you have your workbook, you can turn to the first page. There's a question, an exercise there. And that is, why do we choose to have children? Okay? If any of you are in the corporate world, and if you've heard of Simon Sinek, and he talks about the importance of the why, and having a mission statement, and knowing why you're doing something. Because when we have a clear why of what we're trying to achieve, it really can ground you in staying focused and not get distracted, So take a minute and just jot down for yourself, what are reasons why people, not necessarily be you personally, but why people choose to have children? What are different reasons? Okay, anyone want to share a reason?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. I think people mostly see it as continuation of themselves.
Yeah.
And that's why they decide to have kids.
Right, like a legacy.
Right.
I want that when I leave, will have left behind a child, and this will be, my continuity. Okay, anyone else have another reason?
To have a meaning.
Okay, to bring meaning to their life, to their own life. Anything else? One last.
Tax write-off.
Ah, there you go, the best reason ever. So one of the things that we'll notice is that very often the reasons why parents have children, if we're really honest with ourselves, the reasons and the motivation can be very selfish and very much about the parents. I'm looking to fill a void in my life. I want to have meaning. I want to leave a legacy. I want a tax write-off. And here's the ironic thing, if we would have phrased the question differently of why not to have children, we can come up with many good reasons that are very logical about why not to have kids. You have more time, you save that money, you won't even need that tax write-off. You're going to have quiet time. Like, there's even now a growing movement actually based on this idea. I don't know if you've heard about this among the new millennial generation, writing books why you shouldn't have kids. So why are we having children? And yet, thank God, the world is populated, people do have children, and there must be a reason that's beyond just for our own purposes and for ourselves. So we're going to now basically kind of look at what happens when we take this idea and this mindset to the extreme. So this, thank God, doesn't really happen in nowadays, but what would happen if the idea of parenting being about the parent, being the primary focus in the parenting relationship versus the child, that the child is basically there to meet a need by the parent. What would happen if we would take that to the extreme? So we're going to look at a text. Again, this is text 1 if you have the textbook with you. Okay. if you're able to pull it up in front of you. And we're going to look at what happened in ancient Roman times. So in the Roman Empire, there was a concept of patria potestas. Okay? If you have to study the ancient civilizations, this would be something you're familiar with. So thumbs up if you guys have the text in front of you and are able to help with reading some of the texts. All right, that's fine. I'll read it and then, and you guys will listen along. And if you're able to have, like, pull up after the class the PDF in front of you, that's great. So here we go. This is a text explaining how patria potestas worked. So patria potestas, which is Latin for power of a father. Okay, so in other words, in Roman Empire, the primary person who had power was the father. In Roman family law, power that the male head of a family exercised over his children and his more remote descendants in the male line, whatever their age, as well as over those brought into the family by adoption. This power meant originally not only that he had control over the persons of his children, amounting even to a right to inflict capital punishments. So this is where you have the idea that, you know, where they would sometimes choose to basically kill their children if they felt that their child wasn't, you know, wouldn't be beneficial to society, wouldn't be able to serve them. Sadly, we see this does happen sometimes in China and rural areas where, you know, you hear these stories, or in India, you know, if they wanted to have a boy or a girl, the opposite, and they would, you know, tragically murder their children. So in that time, it was considered legal for a parent to kill their child because they had total control. And not only that, but he alone had any rights in private law. Thus, acquisition of a child became the property of the father. The father might allow a child, as he might a slave, certain property to treat as his own, but in the eye of the law, it continued to belong to the father. So this was the way that the majority of Western civilization operated from this point of view, that parents were totally in control and children were nothing. Children were to be seen and not heard, right? It wasn't considered healthy to hug a child. It was all about the parents and the child fulfilling the parents' needs. Children were sent off to work to bring in money, right? Totally different mindset of what we see in modern society today. In modern society today has actually adopted a different mindset that is rooted in Judaism. That's why today it's not considered a society, like a social norm to do this. This will be considered criminal. But the reason for that is because the Western world has adopted a Jewish value. So in contrast to that, when we looked at Torah view and we look at all of the Torah texts that describe Jewish law with regard to these matters, the law would always side with the children and not with the father, ever. It was always about what's in the best interest of the children. So we're talking, let's say, if we look at a text from a Torah, a halachic rabbi who would basically describe certain halachic rulings. He lived in 1479 to 1573, okay? Totally different world. And he was describing cases where basically a mother dies and the father is suing for custody for the child. And he claims this child is mine. In that time, which was not the norm, the father was not allowed to adopt the child, but rather the rabbis would rule based on what was in the best interest of the children, and the child would have to be placed in the home where they would be cared for best. And the father didn't have rights, okay? And there are other examples like this where it was not about the father or the parent, but actually about the children. So this teaches us this idea that in the Torah view, it's not about us and what we want and how the child will fit into my life and how the child will bring meaning to me, because the child is not there to serve the parent, but the exact opposite. The exact opposite. So another example, so we see about, let's say, in custody, that laws regarding child custody are not intended to benefit the parents, and that child, and whereas in contrast in history, it was the exact opposite, and it has only changed now towards the end of the 20th century, okay? Another example, okay, I'll just read you a text. That says, the laws regarding child custody are not intended to benefit the parents, but the children. A son or daughter is not an object over which the father or mother has rights. Again, this was something by a rabbi that lived in the early 1900s. The father and mother have no rights, only, and here's the key word, obligations, namely the obligation to raise and educate their children. So from the Torah view, the Jewish perspective is that having children is an obligation rather than a right, that our children are entrusted to us and that we have responsibilities towards them, and our needs are not really necessarily relevant. Okay. Now, the reason why this is really valuable is because what can often happen when parenting, a kind of misguided direction of parenting, is that we can essentially kind of project our own views, our own visions, our own ideas onto our children. Because if it becomes all about us, like here you have this example in this cartoon, good news, mom, I got into the college of your choice. Okay, good parenting, not such great parenting. A little bit of a parenting failure. I mean, the mom looks like she's having a lot of nachas, but it's not necessarily what's in the best interest of the child. The child has a unique mission to fulfill in their life. And if we project, if we make it all about us, then they cannot find their way. So here is another example of a text from Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz. He's a modern day Torah scholar, brilliant rabbi, lives in Israel, and he writes, first and foremost, parenting is about love. It is about truly loving our children, and true love means doing what is good for my beloved. Anytime you're in a relationship, that's what it's about, right? Not doing what is good for me. Some parents make big plans for their children, but they forget to ask, are those plans really good for my children? Maybe those plans are just good for me and my image as a parent. And very often it's not that we necessarily we do rationalize that this is what I'm being a good parent, that this is for the child's benefit. But sometimes we don't realize that there's this line that gets blurred where I'm worried about my image as a parent. And what Rabbi Steinsaltz is saying, that just like with any loving relationship, it's about giving yourself totally over to the other person, to your beloved. And that's really what parenting is about. It's the same way with our children. So we're going to give here 2 scenarios, okay? You guys think about this exercise. If this has ever happened to you, then you'll know exactly what this feels like. Your son wants to wear his favorite outfit to school. The pants are frayed and too small and clash with the shirts. Okay? What would be your normal, natural response to this situation and why? Anyone want to share? Anyone brave enough to share? What would you want to do in that situation?
Sure. You'd say, no. I mean, I would say, no, those pants are no good. We need to change your outfit.
Okay, why would that be your response?
I guess my own perception of how a neat look should be and how a student should look when they're attending school or whatever event they're going to.
Okay, fair enough. Anyone else want to share?
Thank God for uniforms and Mazel. We don't have to deal with this.
Oh my God, yes, at least we're spared for school. Yes.
Okay, but what about the birthday party where all of your friends and family will be there and your child wants to put on, I don't know, something completely, Anyone have a different response? Anyone wouldn't have the child change?
I would ask the child to look in the mirror, and we would discuss the look. And if a child doesn't come to the conclusion himself that something needs to be changed, I would try to offer something else, maybe more colorful. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I would let him go like this.
Right. So the truth is, here's confession. There isn't exactly a right or wrong answer of here's what you should do, and this is what we mean when we say it's the art of parenting. Here's what you should do and here's what you shouldn't do. There is an underlying principle, and that is asking ourselves, what is our motivator? So when we ask a child to change and we don't want them wearing this outfit, is it because I'm going to be mortified if my kid shows up to that event looking like that? Or is it because of something that is beneficial for the child? So meaning, if, for example, I want the child to learn social norms, that when you go to a party, there's a way you dress, and I want to guide them and teach them. I want to teach them how to dress like appropriately. Is it because I'm worried that if we're going to go to, to school looking this way, they're going to get teased, right? So it's beneficial for the child. So that's really where that underlying principle of the matter is. And there, like, either whichever decision you may decide, you know what, for now, I'm going to make the choice that for my child at this age, it's fine. Or no, they're ready and I'm going to teach it to them. And tuning into like what really is driving me, right, is going to make a big difference. And what also happens is that it also affects our emotions. So when we're operating from a place of shame, this kid is going to embarrass me, I can't let this happen, you start to pressure, right? You start to put that pressure. There's no way we are leaving this house in that outfit. But this is, I guess, the beginning of starting to understand this idea that the Torah is presenting of who really is at the center of decision-making when it comes to parenting. Is it about the parent or is it about the child? Okay, let's look at the next scenario. Okay. Your daughter has a meltdown in the supermarket. You're getting the look from fellow shoppers. This ever happened to anybody? No? No one ever had this experience with your children out in public? Okay, I guess it's just me. Okay, so you're having that situation and you're getting the look. Everyone looks as if they've never seen this before in their life. They've never seen a 4-year-old screaming in a shopping cart for some reason. All right, and you're getting that look. Okay, so let's start with like the normal, natural response and how would we react to it?
You try and quiet the child.
Okay. What would you do? How would you do it?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't really stress over these things in public, so maybe I'm not a good.
No. Okay, tell us why. Why have you chosen not to get caught up in that?
There's plenty of other things to stress over, and this just allows them to be who they are. And if they want to yell and scream, that's fine. We can try and reason. If it's, you're not going to be able to reason with them in that moment,
right,
because you're not at a place where you can do that.
Right.
So hopefully they come down and you can discuss that at home.
Right.
But I'm sorry, would you leave the store or you would still stay and continue doing your shopping?
I would totally stay and continue doing my shopping. I would just ignore it.
I mean, Hani, as you said before, this is a normal reaction for kids, and anyone that has kids has experienced it, no matter whether we reacted properly, improperly, whatever, by society norms. So if I'm out in the supermarket and one of my kids is having a tantrum, and, you can try to reason with them, but the chances of that happening, as Anna just said, are slim to none. So you let them have their tantrum and deal with it when you're both level-headed, instead of trying to do it when you're upset because they're having a tantrum and you're trying to calm them down, and you're probably going to start screaming at them and infuriate them even more, and they're not going to calm down because coping mechanisms. So let other people stare. Who really cares?
Right. And by the way, if anyone over here would have a totally different reaction, like if anyone would buy the closest candy nearby and just stick it in their kid's mouth and just like, okay, I'm just going to bribe you to be quiet for this little bit of time. Just by the way, no judgment. We all relate. We've all definitely tried doing stuff like that. And I think that that's really the key. The key is, again, that it's about tuning into yourself. So when I'm hearing what you guys have been talking about in this in this particular scenario, is tuning into, like, internally, thinking about what's happening inside of me and kind of taking control of your thought process and of your emotions. And this is essentially one of the most fundamental tricks to learning how to parent our children. Because as soon as, and this is one of the ways to also know if this is about the parent, like, how do you know when, in which situation to give the child the lollipop, and in which situation to say, kicking or screaming, we're staying here, or to say, no, we're actually going to leave the store now. Like, all of these are normal reactions to situations, and they're all fine. Good parenting can include all of them. How do you know which one to choose in which situation? So a really good litmus test to use is, again, thinking about, what does my child need in this moment right now, and what's in my child's best interest, and also, where are my emotions at in this moment? So if my emotional state at this moment is anger and frustration, I'm probably not going to be able to figure out what the best thing to do. If my response, meaning if I'm giving the child a lollipop because I'm just too embarrassed myself, and that's not what's okay. If I'm giving the child a lollipop because I'm thinking, you know what, it's not such a big deal, and in this moment, in this time, they're not going to perceive it as if I'm giving into them. I'm just, we're going to make shopping into a fun experience. It's better for the kid. It's okay. It's fine. It's all about where you're coming from. If you're, tuning into yourself and you're like, listen, I'm in a state of calm. I don't care about what everyone else is thinking. The child can cry right now. It's fine. For the kid, this is okay. They can learn that we can go to the store and they can learn to handle themselves. All of this is fine, as long as the key is what's in the best interest of the child, and I'm tuning into myself. Like, one of the things that the Torah teaches about is that we should never discipline our children in a state of anger. Because the moment it becomes about me and my feelings, it doesn't work. And if you remember as a child being on the receiving end of discipline, and when it was about the teacher and the teacher's agenda, or the parents, or any adult, you picked it up immediately and they lost credibility and it didn't work. So that's really kind of the underlying principle over here to this idea. Now, the second principle of today's class, so the first principle is the idea that parenting is about the children. Parenting is about, is a responsibility and obligation of the parent. It's not about me and my vision and what I want in my life. It's about, these children have been entrusted in me. Like, I am their, like, if somebody gave you a diamond and said, take care of this for 120 years or God willing more, like, I'm going to make sure to take care of it. It's not about me. It's about taking care of that diamond. The second message, the second principle that Torah introduces in terms of Torah approach to parenting is to not be a peer aunt. Peer, as in, like, peers. To parent rather than be a parent. So there's this fascinating quote from Anne Frank in her diary, where she says, as you know, I've frequently complained about Mother and then tried my best to be nice. I've suddenly realized what's wrong with her. Mother has said that she sees us more as friends than daughters. That's all very nice, of course, except that a friend can't take the place of a mother. I need my mother to set a good example and be a person I can respect. This brilliant words from a young girl, so wise, so smart. And this is, I think, in today's, 21st century, parenting world, is a novel idea, unfortunately, because there's so much of this pressure to, like, be cool with our kids, show them that we get it. They don't need us to be their friends. They have only one mother and one father, and they need us to be their parents. And especially eventually, like, as Anne, she was like, if you've ever read Anne Frank and what she's describing, she was like basically describing her teenage dilemmas and looking for guidance. She was expressing, I wanted my mother to be a role model for me and be a parent. I didn't need a friend. And think about this, she was alone without friends, just with her sister, stuck in that room. And yet that's what she was looking for from her mother. Such brilliant words. Now we have another idea where we see this in contrast in Judaism. So in Judaism, in Torah, the way that a parent is viewed is that a parent is a child's moral guide and compass who teaches the child right from wrong. Teaches the child, this is right, this is beautiful, and this is wrong, this is not okay, this is ugly. So I'm going to read for you, this is text 6. This is a quote where Hashem describes Avram, the first Jew, first Jewish dad. He says, I love Avram. Hashem says, I love Avraham. Why? Why does Hashem love Avram? He says, I love Avraham because he instructs his children and his household after him to follow the path of God by doing righteousness, charity, and justice. So why did Hashem love Avram? He loved Avram because he saw that Avram was a parent, and he focused his life on teaching his children and his entire household on what is the right thing and to follow the path of God. So he did not take the approach of, you know what, I'm going to let my children just make their own choices. If they want to be like this, they can be like this. If they want to if they feel like going in this direction, they should feel like they can go in this direction. Now, to be clear, earlier we said that a parent should not what's it called? Like impose their own, like we saw in that cartoon. I got into the college of your choice. It's not what this is about. What this is about teaching the child themselves how they can be the best person that they can be, so they can be on the right path. So this is not a parent imposing onto the child. This is a parent guiding and teaching the child. And when the parent is doing this, they're not doing this because they want to do this for themselves, because I have that dream college that I wanted you to go to. But rather they're doing this because this is what's best for the child. Okay? Any questions so far? Great. Are you guys with me? Do you agree with these ideas? Does this sound like something like, hey, this we can buy into this? Okay.
I just want to comment, you have to be very wise to understand what is the best for a child, because you might think it's the best for the child the way you know your kid, but who knows if it is. It's not a completed, adult. Like it's still, a child is still growing and lots of things are changing. So how do you know that this is best for the child?
Right, that's a really good question. I think that what you touched on is a really important point about the importance of humility. It's important to acknowledge that I don't know exactly. Come from a place of humility. And that place of humility creates space. And in that space, you tune into your child and observe them, watch them. You've seen them from the instant that they were born, and even before, right? You already felt them, we were watching them develop even in the 9 months prior to that. But from the instant that they enter this world, you were connected to them. So there is a certain instinct, a certain wisdom that God does grant parents to help guide them if we tune into it and don't project our own ideas. So if we come from a place of humility, create that space and tune into the child and constantly ask that question, exactly like you said, like, is this really what's best for my kid right now? There's actually a very famous quote that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, not Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, but his father-in-law, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak said. He said that every day a person should spend 30 minutes a day thinking about, what have I done for children's Jewish education? So it means on a regular basis, daily basis, we need to take the time to think, how is it going? Right? And then God willing, and there's the other element of also that humility brings to prayer, like asking Hashem to help you as a parent figure it out the right way. And then gradually, slowly, over the course of 18 years, you're able to help guide the child to the right way. But it does definitely help when the starting point is, this is about I want to figure out what's in the best interest of my kids. Right? And I want to make sure that I raise a child that knows the right thing. It's not about me being their friend and having a relationship. And like if you read, and when you will get the textbook, and if you get a chance to print it out, there's in text 7, there's basically kind of like an oppositional text, like a text from a psychologist describing effective parenting today. And when you read that, you see how in 21st century parenting, it presents a totally opposite model. It's basically, he's advising that the way you should talk to your child is that, I have my needs, and I'm going to expect you to respect my needs. And when you respect my needs, I will also respect yours. And we're going to talk together. And it's very different. Now, this does not mean, God forbid, that in Judaism, we don't tune into a child. We have to hear children, treat them with respect, but not because, it goes, not because of the children need to basically kind of take control, but rather because we're trying to educate and train the children, and also because it's a relationship of love. And when a relationship is based on love, we listen, we treat them kindly, and we're trying to model for our children how to be careful, to use only kind words, how when we give criticism, we do it sensitively. That's the reason why, from a Jewish point of view, we're supposed to tune into our children's emotional needs and be loving and supportive, not because we're trying to have a relationship of equals. Okay, now, we're going to talk about a very fundamental Jewish parenting tool, and that's the idea of respect. Now, this is one of the 10 commandments, kibbud av v'em, of honoring your parents, honoring your mother and father. And there's 2 aspects to it. There is respect, and then there's reverence. So like awe. Reverence is the word that describes when you're talking about someone that's above you. Like you look up to them. I revere you. So this already tells us that the parent is not meant to be on the same level as the child, but we look up to them. Now, you can have fun with someone that you revere. You can enjoy spending time with them, right? But it's not about, I want to show you that I'm just as cool as you. It's not about trying to be cool. It's about having a good time and being happy together, okay? So it's about, the parenting tool here is about respect and reverence. So we're going to read some texts, and I'll read to you, of sources in the Torah that describe this. So here we have first, honor your father and mother so that your days should be lengthened. This is the only thing in the 10 commandments that is listed with an actual reward. If you keep this, there's a reward. You'll live long, you'll have a long life. Okay, another place in the Torah, in Leviticus, it says, each person shall revere his mother and father. So there's that respect and the reverence element. Now, here are specific Torah laws around this idea of reverence, okay? So in the Talmud, it says, reverence implies that one may not stand in a place designated for one's parent to stand, or sit in a place designated for one's parent to sit. One may not contradict a parent, nor express a view in an instant where others disagree with a parent's opinion. It's really interesting text that the Torah is describing. So let's look at this in very specific ways. Like, how does this apply? So we'll talk first about reverence. So here are some things that are very much Jewish parenting like culture. So one is having a set place that is designated for parents. And I've actually, in speaking with many parents in our community, I've learned that a lot of families, Russian parents have taught their children to do the same. So let's say growing up, or in our house, we have, there's 2 chairs, that one is my chair and one is my husband's chair, and the kids will know, usually from around age 3, that if they want to sit there, they have to ask for permission. And it's so cute. They're like, can I sit in your chair? Yes, of course. It's almost always yes. There's never a no, but just the fact that they're acknowledging that I need to ask for permission, it already sets a certain boundary into place. And that a parent is something to revere. According to Jewish law, we're not allowed to address a parent by their name. We're not allowed to address a parent by their name. And in fact, sometimes it's cute, like my younger children will say, you know, they called you by your name, or like they'll say, there's a girl in my class who has the same name as you, and I'll have to tell them, you know, you're allowed to say the name of your friend when you're around me. It's only when you're talking to me that you can't say my name. But it represents a certain idea that this is my mom, this is my dad. They're not my friend that I can just talk to them like by a first name. And it's interesting because in today's world, we've almost lost some of this. Like, I feel like in, you know, the olden times, you know, you wouldn't even call your friend's parents by their first name. You would say Mr. So-and-so. But that doesn't happen anymore with children. In America today, that's not considered the expectation. But in 1950s America, you would never call, you know, a friend's parents by anything other than a Mr. or Mrs. But especially in that kind of culture or environment where children are being raised on, you know, sitcoms, where the parents are always presented as stupid, are not as intelligent as children, and the children are always way smarter than them, we need to, in our homes, strengthen as much as we can the idea that parents are an entity to revere. And we're not doing this because we need the reverence. It's not for us. It's not about that, right? You didn't have kids because you needed someone to honor you. It's not about that at all. It's for the children, because this will help them learn this important skill, and will also set you in that position to guide them. Because you cannot be that parent like that we saw that was described about Avram, the first, you know, our forefather, who he taught his whole household to follow the path of God and follow the path of righteousness and charity, if you're not in that position. Because if you're on the same level as a child, then why should I listen to you? Like, you're just like me. Why should I have to listen to your advice, or why should I turn to you for advice? That's why it's important for the kid. Another example of reverence is not contradicting a parent's opinion. And we'll talk more about an actual way that we can teach kids the right way to contradict a parent. If a parent sometimes is wrong, or the child has a different opinion than us, which they're entitled to, but they can't actually contradict them. Another idea in Jewish law is the concept that when a parent enters the room, to rise. And this is something that we do also with teachers. You know, if you'll have a Torah scholar speaking, everyone will stand up before they speak. Some families will focus on this idea. In some families, they'll tell their children, you know what, it's okay, I'm not going to be strict about this. But there are many families that will do that. They'll teach their children just to get up for a second when the parent walks into the room. And again, all of this is not for the parent, but for the child. So essentially, what the Torah's view is that there's a certain hierarchy that is necessary for a family Jewish home in order to access that, like we said in the beginning, like what is really the advantage that the Torah and Judaism has in terms of parenting. There's that track record, thousands of years and generations of Jewish families that have passed on, you know, traditions or certain qualities or values. A key part of that is that there's a hierarchy in the house. And that hierarchy is that there are parents and there are children. And the parents create a sense of safety and security for the children by being the parent, and the children learn to revere and respect their parents. And that Torah perspective is that it is fundamental to maintain that prestige to the parent, that a parent is prestigious. And that positions the parent to be able to be the one that guides the parent, okay, and is able to guide the family. And kind of like the parent is at the top, like, here is the ship, this is the way that we're going to go, this is the direction that we as a family are going to go, and this is how we're going to ensure that there's continuity of these values. Like, even if we operate off of, let's say, the first idea that we said of why parents want to have children, what's motivated is a legacy. But if we don't take that position of we're going to guide our children, then what will be the legacy? And the beginning step in order to do that is to place yourself in that position of hierarchy. So rather than following the way it is in Western society, where children, you know, parents are encouraged to develop friendships with the children, that's not healthy from a Torah point of view. And this Torah point of view has stayed consistent throughout all of time. So here are some practical applications. Don't try to be cool. Don't lower yourself to your kids' level. They need you to be mature and steady adult role model. And again, I'm not talking about, like, you can get silly with your kids. You can have fun with them, right? But you know when there's this line between when it's being silly, but then it starts to become like, okay, this is not respectful. And you as the parent know, okay, now I'm going to pull back. And you just pull back and you're like, okay, that's it. It's stopping now. And you're able to control. Now we're going to have fun and I'm going to be silly, but now I'm going to pull back. And the kids see that and they learn that, you know what, I can have fun with my parent. You know, I'm happy to be around them. I enjoy their company, but they're not trying to be cool. Like if you look at this image, you know, like you can tell when a parent is just trying too hard. Now, do you think kids, teens really appreciate that? Or are they rolling their eyes like, seriously, Dad? Like, come on. So it doesn't actually work. Not only doesn't it, the kids don't actually think their parent is cool, and it doesn't help them in terms of, you know, having that leverage and position in the house of being a parent, which the child has only 2 parents. There's no one else in the entire universe that can play that role. Second practical application is to not abdicate your leadership position. So in terms of making decision making, okay? So a parenting strategy that we definitely do today is we give children choices. Little things, okay? Do you want vanilla ice cream, chocolate ice cream? That's a control choice. But real decisions, that's something that you as a parent can and should make for your child. However, like something, for example, that we'll often do in our house is we'll hear the child out. We'll say, I want to hear your point of view. And then we'll say, all right, now we're going to think about what you said and we'll let you know what we decide. Again, this is for especially younger children. When children get older, then you want to give them a little bit more ownership of the decision making. But even then, as long as they're 18, they're living under your roof, you still have that decision making power. And they will learn to respect and turn to you for advice, right? And they'll know that at the end of the day, the green light, the go ahead comes from you. But at the same time, they can also know that you will hear their perspective, especially when it's shared with you in a respectful way. Okay, any comments or thoughts about this part, what we're talking about right now? Okay, great. So now let's get to a specific situation. Like, how do you do this? Your kids come to you, they're demanding, they're like, they open the fridge and they're like, there's nothing to eat here. I'm starving. We never have any food in this house. Anyone ever hear that in their household? Anyone have been hearing that for the last 6 weeks while you're quarantined? No matter how many times there's more food in the house? I see someone laughing. All right, so our responsibility as parents is to teach our children, like, how exactly are they going to know how to be respectful and have reverence? Like, they're not born with this. We teach them, just like Avram taught his children in his household. So how do we teach them? So Sarah Chana Radcliffe, she's a parenting expert. So she gives a lot of parenting, like, practical tips. So one thing that we want to teach our children is how to use a pleasant voice. So if they're coming and they're like, there's nothing to eat here. Okay, let's try that again I want like a pleasant voice. Okay, so one is about voice. The second thing is teaching them how to ask questions rather than statements. So reframe exactly the same thing as a question. So, Mom, I'm hungry. Is there anything to eat? Totally different. Like, what can I have for a snack? Totally different. That's respectful, right? And that's okay. So teaching our children how to reframe, giving them that, like, coach them. Sometimes you have to just coach them. They don't know unless we coach them and give them the words. Okay, let's try that another way. Let's try that with a pleasant voice. Or do you mind asking like that as a question rather than telling me a statement? Okay. Another important point is they cannot order you around. Go make me something. Again, same thing. Use a pleasant voice, ask a question. Are you trying to ask me something? You know, Mom, can you make me something to eat? And then you are the one that has control. You can say yes or no. Or dad, can you help me with this? Rather than go print this out for me right now. I have to be on my Zoom in 10 seconds. Okay, so this is really up to us, and we have that power as parents to make that decision, to guide them. Because the moment that we respond and we give in, if after they open the fridge and scream, there's nothing to eat here, and they made it as a statement and they ordered you around, right? And you do it, now they know that this is the way to get the result that they want. But the moment that you say, hold on, let's try this a different way, now you're teaching them how to do it differently. And you're the only one who can do it. You're the only one who can teach them how to do this. There's no one else that can do it. The other point is about correcting a parent in a respectful way. So there's this interesting text that I'm going to read to you again, also from the book of Jewish law. So this was written in the mid to late 1800s. And this is from something called Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's the most fundamental, basic, classic Jewish text of Jewish law that you'll find, in a Jewish house. And it says, if one sees his father transgressing, he must not say. So we're literally describing, let's say to this point, to correcting a parent in a respectful way. We're describing a situation if they see their parent doing something totally wrong, not like an opinion, but that you see your parent doing something totally wrong. Here's what the Torah has to say about that. You're not allowed to say you have violated a Torah commandment. So we're talking about a parent is violating something in the Torah. The Torah itself is saying you're not allowed to tell the parent, how could you do that? You violated a Torah commandment. Rather, he should say, Father, doesn't the Torah say such and such? The tone should be that of a question rather than an admonishment. The father will then understand that he made a mistake, but will not be humiliated. Just think for a minute about the depth of that guidance. The Torah itself says you must honor your father even more than making sure that your father follows what the Torah says. Because that's the position that the Torah has put parents in. And we are the ones that teach our children, just like we teach them everything else, to say please and thank you and excuse me. We teach them how to speak to us in a respectful way. You see that I did something wrong? Here's how you can correct me. Exactly how it said. The tone should be that of a question and not of an admonishment. Do you want to ask me? Maybe I think I noticed that there was a pump over there. I think that I noticed that, whatever. I read in an article something. What do you think about that? The child can't contradict the parent in a way that humiliates the parent. Think about how that contrasts to sitcom television, where it's all about embarrassing or humiliating, the parents. So this is a very different model that Judaism presents of what makes a Jewish home a Jewish home. It begins first with that parents being in that special position, and we can put ourselves there. And if you've noticed, sometimes it takes time, you may not always even realize something gets eroded. So I've had that happen with certain children. I didn't even realize that I was responding when they were speaking in a disrespectful tone, and maybe months later, someone would realize, hold on a second, something here has shifted. I need to roll it back a little bit. I started becoming more cognizant. I might speak to the child about it, and then there's an improvement. So it's okay if this is not something that you started at first in your household, from day one. You'll get there. So really important part of this is that it's a process, and we have to remember and acknowledge that Hashem has given us our children, and he handpicked the match. He made the shidduch. He gave us our kids because he felt that we would be the best one to raise them. Many, when my children were young, I used to tell them the bedtime story. And now with my little ones, I tell to them again about their soul, before they were born, how much we wanted them. We wanted it, and Hashem looked among all the souls in heaven to see who would be the best one. And Hashem said, you know what, this is just the right soul for this family. And these parents are the best ones for this soul. And we welcomed you into our family. And sometimes I know I've a narrative that often I'll hear parents talk about is this idea. I think it's an American concept. The child chose the parents, right? But there is something here about that Hashem, like, let's remember that Hashem chose us for our children because he really believes that we are the one that can raise them the best way. And to go back to the question that was mentioned earlier about how do we know? Hashem believes that we have the wisdom inside of us. It does take a lot of wisdom, but we do have it within us. And we can only do our best. We can try our best. We can set goals, keep working on them, try to strive hard, like higher until we achieve them. The most important thing is to get our ego out of the way, focus only on what is best for our child, not about ourselves. So we want to kind of be in the picture, but at the same time out of the picture. Like you can see this example of rappelling, where you have like, you know, the rope you're holding on, you're there, you're guiding, but at the same time, it's not about us. Okay, before we get to the exercise of the week, actually, I want to play for you this great recording that, I don't know if you guys have, this was going viral at the time, a slam poetry of a Jewish teen who it's called, his name is Ethan Metzger. It's called My Parents Brainwashed Me. Okay?
There's someone I know who's slow to commend or quick to condescend, who's reluctant to lend a hand but ready to point and laugh at those who need one. One day I was in school, in class, explaining my Judaism when this person has the audacity to explain, you know, you're only Jewish because your parents forced you to be. I mean, it's all fake. You don't pray to God because you want to. You only pray to God because your parents made you think you have to. You don't keep any of the laws of your own free will. Your parents just made you feel guilty that you didn't keep them. My classmates smirked. Your parents brainwashed you your whole life, made you think you were doing God's work, but they were just imposing restriction upon restriction. You don't have any real conviction of your own. You don't really know anything about anything. A silence swept over the classroom. I could sense how my friends looked at me as to how I would react. I felt like this fear went after me, and more importantly, my parents. Excuse me, I thought. My parents brainwashed me? I didn't think of a response, but the more I thought, the more I realized that the student actually had a very valid argument. I thought to myself, you're absolutely right. My parents did brainwash me. From the time I entered this world, my parents brainwashed me. As early as I can remember, my parents were brainwashing me to have respect for other people, for their belongings, and for myself. Since I was little, they corrupted me into thinking that I need to treat everyone else the way I would want to be treated, no matter what. My parents programmed me to believe that I should stand up for someone, that person for being picked on, that I shouldn't be biased, and if I could stop the law from taking place. My parents brainwashed me? Yeah. My father twisted my infant brain in such a horrific way that he made me value my integrity. And to make matters even worse, he led by example. And my mom, she incessantly told me as a child again and again and again to just do the best you can. And that idea has now become so ingrained in my mind that I don't define success as whether I get an A or whether the game has been given my all. My parents perverted my way of thinking, causing me to believe I need to be accepting of other people and their beliefs. They contaminated my childhood with mottos and maxims and lessons about love and faith and character, and yes, religion too. And I'm sorry for you that your parents clearly didn't infect your DNA with any of these ideals. But I didn't say any of that, because my parents also polluted my conscience to believing that I shouldn't judge someone until I walk a mile in their shoes, which makes me think that God must run millions of marathons each day. Quite frankly, I don't have the stamina for that. But here's what I did say. You can call it brainwashing if you want. That's fine. I call it teaching. Thank you.
Okay, I know it was a little bit hard to hear, but you can Google it. You can look up. It's called My Parents Brainwashed Me by Ethan Metzger. And if you were able to catch what he basically described as a situation, you know, he's a high school student, and in his high school class, someone basically challenged him and said, you know, your parents brainwashed you, because he's observant. You know, he wears a kippah, and he said, he basically is like, here's what I wanted to say. Like, you know what? You're right. My parents did brainwash me. They brainwashed me that you should be kind. They brainwashed me. And he lists all the different things that his parents taught him. And he said, you know, I didn't end up, and he has this whole like rant, I didn't even end up saying that because my parents also brainwashed me that you should be like mindful of how you speak to people. And all he said was, and those were his closing words, you know, you're right, you can call it brainwashing, but I call it teaching. And this is really, I think, like the essential idea that from Judaism's point of view, being a parent, yeah, you can call it brainwashing, you can call it, you know, you know, you should be like, I'm having like a sterner, you know, more serious relationship with my parent, but that's okay. That's what it means to be a parent. That's what it means to be a teacher. And that's our responsibility. So here are 2 exercises for the week until next week. One is to work on this idea of selfless parenting. So to identify one way that you can modify your parenting approach to better accommodate your child's needs. So to really kind of tune into this question of what's motivating me in this moment. So like, let's say, for example, like just to give you an example, if you think of the last time that you yelled at your kid, okay, I think we can all think of that moment. Last time that you yelled at your child. In that situation, when you yelled at them, what was really the motivator? Where was it coming from? Was it coming from something that, like, you know, from a place where I was feeling, you know, a need not being met, something was frustrating me, or was it about the child? So really the first exercise to think about is there one way that you could modify your parenting approach to focus more on the child's interest? Okay. And the second exercise is to look at how to establish parental status. So to identify one area in your or your child's behavior that could be modified to improve your standing as your child's parent and guide. So it could be anything from like some of the things that we mentioned, you know, of how the child talks to you, how they, you know, anything that we discussed earlier, how they phrase questions rather than demands and statements, the tone of voice that they'll use, how your space is respected in the household. Just pick one area that you think you can try to improve on that would improve your status of being more of that parent and guide rather than, you know, the parent. And for next week, the next topic is going to be parents, the noun, and the verb. So let's take some questions or thoughts or comments about the topics, the themes that we've explored today, questions, things that are on your mind in listening to all of this.
It was very thought-provoking.
Great, I'm glad
Thank
to
you.
hear that. A pleasure.
And I will share this speech from the teenage era, I guess, on my parents brainwashed with my kids.
Yeah, it's cool, right? And what's really cool is both the response of the audience and also how confident he is. And what's so impressive is that, you know, when you look at how he stands with such confidence and such poise, and you think, well, where does the kid get that from? And he's giving his parents the credit that they raised him in this way. Like, that's really success. That's awesome. Yeah. All right, if anyone also would like to share like their email address, if you want me to share with you like the text from today's lesson, I can email it to you. You can just drop it into the chat. I can also add you to, we've set up like a Google event for your Google Calendar that has a link to the Zoom. If you want to be added to that, you can just drop your email address in the chat and I'll make sure to include you to that. And yes, I would also say it's really helpful to encourage when you're doing this together with other parents that are taking a similar approach, it's really helpful. I also know that some couples join together, and that can also be very helpful if you're doing it together with another parent. You know, co-parenting is another big part of this process. You want to do it together. And what I can also do is I can share with you the recording of this session as well so that you can watch it together as a family and engage in some interesting conversation. And really, we have so much to be proud of as a Jewish nation and Jewish people, like what we've really contributed to the world. And a lot of the ideas, the positive ideas that exist in today's society come from, you know, the idea of even treating children in a respectful way comes from Jewish traditions. And the more we tune into it, you know, ourselves, we can really empower us and help us in our parenting approach as well.
Ani, I think there's some people that didn't get the message for some reason. I don't know. There's just lots of emails going in. So if you're going to share the recording, that'd be great. Maybe we can post it on the parents page.
Okay, that's a good idea. We can just share it publicly with all the parents. Yeah, we can do that.
This is very helpful. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody next week. I've reviewed multiple times the course all the way through to the end, and I'm really impressed. It's fantastic on a practical level, and also just, you know, interesting to really learn the context of, you know, Jewish parenting. So thank you everybody for joining, and tell your friends, encourage them to come on.
Thanks for teaching us.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for your time from 7:30 in the morning until 10:30 at night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful evening. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Fanny. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.